Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming along to this evening's farewell event for our departing Senator Richard Di Natale. My name is Rosie Collins and I have had the privilege of working with Richard as his executive assistant for the last 3.5 years of his leadership, and I'll be hosting this evening's webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we're all dialing in from. I'm dialing in from Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that as Greens and as activists, we are committed to fighting alongside Indigenous people for truth, justice and reconciliation. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So a little housekeeping before we get into things. We'll be splitting this webinar into 2 halves. So Richard and I will be having a chat for the first half, and then we'll be going through some questions from the audience, so from you out there in the internet. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Zoom chat filter and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. To do that, make sure that they're marked as all panelists and all attendees. That way Alex and James, who are monitoring the chat, can get us through your questions. Also, the webinar will be recorded. We won't be recording your mic or your webcam. It'll just be us on the screen and the chat so people can read through later. And also Richard is calling in from the country, so hopefully his internet holds up. Now, Dr. Richard Di Natale is the former leader of the Australian Greens. Richard was elected to the Federal Parliament in 2010 as the Greens' first Senator for Victoria, becoming leader in 2015. Prior to entering Parliament, Richard was a GP and public health specialist. He worked in the NT on Aboriginal health and HIV prevention. He spent some time working in India and has done also work in the drug and alcohol sector. Some of Richard's parliamentary achievements include winning $5 billion towards Medicare-funded dentistry, winning a campaign to divest tobacco stocks from the Future Fund, and lifting the profile of now big campaigns, Dying with Dignity, medicinal cannabis, and drug law reform. Richard and his lovely wife Lucy and their 2 young sons live off-grid in the farm in the foothills of the Otways, I must say, with an excellent pizza oven. Good evening, Richard. You're looking fabulous.
G'day, Rosie. Lovely to see you.
You too.
And g'day to everyone out there. Look, firstly, can I just say, Rosie and I worked together for 3 years or so, and it was always a joy to work with Rosie. Just such a beautiful human being and such a sunny, happy person. And it was really, it was often a good counterbalance to my grumpiness that's, early in the morning and those cold, chilly Canberra mornings. So it's lovely to do this with you, Rosie. And let me also begin by acknowledging that we're all here right across the country. For those of you tuning in I want to acknowledge the Aboriginal people on whose lands we stand. We acknowledge their fight for justice. We acknowledge that there's unfinished business, and we recommit to doing everything we can to make sure that we achieve truth, justice and reconciliation. So again, just echo that beautiful introduction from you, Rosie. And thank you so much to all of you from right around the country for tuning in. I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. I think we've got quite a few people out there, which is exciting. So Richard, you've had a very big year. You've been recovering from major surgery. You've wrapped up your, decade in Parliament, and all amongst this crazy time with this pandemic. How are you feeling? It's been huge.
Oh dear.
Hello? Richard, can you hear me? All right, folks, I did mention that Richard was in the country and may have some internet difficulties, so just stand by. We'll try and sort that out as quickly as we possibly can. Please bear with us. Might be a chance to pick up that cuppa if you haven't already got one. You're on mute, Richard.
I just said, I'm sorry, it looks like we failed at the first hurdle there, and I'm not sure if the problem was at my end or your end, but I'm assuming it was my end.
I hope we can figure it out from now. We've got you back.
All right.
That's the main thing.
Okay, great. So I got, I think, your question, which was about a tough year. You're right, I had a knee replacement towards the end of last year, and that really knocked me for six. Turned 50 a few months ago, and, you know, to top it all off, the world's been turned on its head. We've had this incredible, you know, it's just one of those moments in human history where the world has just been tipped off its axis, and I think a lot of us are assessing our priorities. I mean, to get to your question, Rosie, I'm personally doing very well. Like I resigned from Parliament to spend time at home with Lucy and the boys, and obviously, you know, the country's now forced to do that. Certainly those of us in Victoria are. So I'm very fortunate to be doing what I was hoping to be able to do when I left Parliament, perhaps a little more of it than I'd planned, and probably a little more of it than Lucy and the boys might like. But, you know, spending time outside, reconnecting with all the things that, you know, I enjoy. It's a very reflective period, I think, when you end your time in a job like this. But I'm doing very well. I just know how hard it is for so many other people, and I've got elderly parents. I know how hard it is for them at the moment. I know how hard it is for people who are struggling financially, and so, you know, while I'm very privileged to be in the position I'm in, I do worry about what is happening right now and what impact it's going to have on so many people.
Yeah, it is a tough time. It's good that you've had a bit of space to kind of move through all that. So you were party leader for 5 years of that decade. I worked it out the whole time to 1,732 long days. What would you say were your top three, you know, highlights of that time? Your most memorable events?
Gosh, lots and lots of highlights, a few lowlights, and, you know, everything in between. I mean, you could, in terms of highlights, there are lots of, you know, achievements. The reason you get into politics is you want to change things for the better. I mean, that's why we do what we do. And before I became leader, to be able to sit there and vote for the world's best climate legislation, something that we'd worked hard on for so many years, that was a terrific thing to be able to achieve. And then, of course, the tragedy of watching it, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it being unwound by the then Abbott government. As leader, to contribute to issues like marriage equality, to be able to achieve some other legislative reforms, the Royal Commission into the banks, we drove that and we led that. Senate voting reform, making the voting system in the Senate more democratic. I mean, there were lots of, I suppose, policy achievements along the way. I was really, one of my proudest moments was during Pauline Hanson's first speech, standing up and leading our team, walking out on her during that speech, and knowing that, you know, our response to that really said to people right across the country, and we heard from them like within a few sort of minutes of walking out, our phone started ringing, and we heard from people, mostly people within the Muslim community, just thanking us, just saying, you know, in tears, taxi drivers ringing up saying, thank you for taking a stand against, you know, hate. And we know we're not alone. And I was really, you know, as someone who's obviously a product of multicultural Australia and a migrant from a migrant family myself, I was really proud to take that strong stand against racism. As I said to you, Rosie, I think the most important thing that I take out of my time is that we did get some really concrete policy changes. And for me, that's why you get in and do the job. You put up with a lot of crap in the job, but you do it because you want to change the country for the better. And those opportunities to stand up and speak for people, and then actually sitting there and doing the hard grinding work of getting legislation through, having that big spotlight on the corrupt banking and finance sector, passing climate laws, getting marriage equality done, all of those things really are things I'm proud of, and they're achievements we achieved together. They're achievements we achieved with our team, with all of our members and supporters, right behind us. And, and in the end, I think as a result of us being there, we've made the country a better place.
Yeah, definitely. I've been there for a few of those big moments that you mentioned, and it really does, that feeling is just so rewarding to be part of. So yeah, wonderful. What would you miss most about your time in the Senate?
There's a lot of stuff I'm not going to miss. There's a lot of stuff I'm not going to miss. Look, I mean, in the end, again, you get into it because you believe in the institution of politics and democracy. It's why you do it. It's why we know how important politics is. We know that we, through the governments we elect, change the nature of the country, and to not be able to do that in the same way is something that you absolutely, that I know I'll miss. And there'll be times when there'll be a big debate playing out when I wish I was back in there and fighting, and sometimes, yelling, although I hope we end up in a parliament where there's less yelling and a little more talking. But that's what I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss not being in there, with hands, on the levers, being able to change things, being able to stand up to people like Pauline Hanson, knowing that, there are so many people who want us to do that and we're their voice. Being the only party, I mean, one of the things that became crystal clear to me during my time is people pay lip service to the environment and to issues like climate change, but we're the only party that genuinely understands and believes, and it's part of our DNA, in the urgency and the need to start recognising that we're part of the world around us. We're not separate from it, and that we have to start looking after all of the life-sustaining systems that make it possible for us to do everything that we do. And it is the Greens in our parliament that represents that, like, really critical strand of thinking, and the only ones fighting to change it. So, I personally will miss not being able to go in there and give my voice to those things through the parliament, but I'll look for other ways to make a contribution.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I can hear your passion is so strong about, those issues. And, I've seen you get angry and get enraged and, really feel that. Do you have any idea where you want to take that motivation, where you want to go next?
I'm not sure yet, Rosie. I know I want to have a bit of a break. And as I said, I think when you come out of a period in your life where you're doing a high pressure job and something that's all consumed, and it's more a vocation really than it is a job, something that consumes almost every aspect of your life, you just need to take some time to decompress a bit and to stop and really return to normal frequency. It's such a strange life and way of being, and you're surrounded by people that in our ordinary lives we would never choose to sort of associate with, but you're in there, often in this incredibly adversarial environment. It's an unnatural environment in many ways. So a bit of time. I think, I want to continue to make a contribution to climate change. At the end, ultimately, for me, that is the singular existential threat that lies ahead of us. I think we're going through a pandemic, and we might get to this later, but we're asking lots of questions about ourselves, our society, our culture, the value of science, and how we've really, in large part, with regards to the pandemic, we've been driven by a response based on science, as uncertain as a lot of it is, and as difficult as some of these decisions are. And we need to have that approach to climate change, because ultimately we'll get through this pandemic, but we are facing not just a threat to humanity, but a threat to all of the life-sustaining systems on the planet. All of the incredible biodiversity that exists is at threat from climate change. So maybe make a contribution in that area. And I know the intersection between climate and health is something that I think I can make a contribution to. Possibly something, again, taking the lessons from this pandemic and looking at how we can reset our society. I think there's some good things, some huge opportunities to come with this. And just wait to see what happens next. The leap into the unknown is something I'm enjoying at the moment. Not knowing what comes next it's actually nice. I'm world of possibilities and all of that.
Well, it's vastly, different from the world of Parliament where everything's regimented and structured, and
that's right.
It must be lovely to just be able to tap out for a little bit and get back to the farm before you launch into anything. And I suppose a lot of Green supporters and members, and a lot of people out there, I'm sure, listening. I know a lot of people are engaged or wanting to get engaged. Do you have any advice for people wanting to either enter into politics or enter into the the climate movement? Perhaps how you did it, or any suggestions for them? Yeah.
Well, I suppose I think there are different ways of making a contribution. So, people are interested in parliamentary politics, whether it be local government level, state or federal. I think you've just got to get in there and roll your sleeves up. And there's no blueprint for how you do it. I think the important thing is never give up. Always be open, to having your thinking challenged is critical. But parliamentary politics, and I suppose the other thing I often say to people who say, how do you become a politician, is develop skills that allow you to make a contribution to the parliament. I think one of the problems we've got in politics at the moment is we've got this political class now where, more than half of the people in the joint have come through, student politics. They've been involved with, party politics at a very young age. They've gone to work for a staffer, work as a staffer for an MP, and then bide their time until they get pre-selection. And that's not to say that's completely, illegitimate, but I think the parliament's better when people come in and bring a set of skills and experience from outside, and they actually enrich the place. So, that's my advice often to young people who are interested in parliamentary politics is to try and develop those other areas in their life that will allow them to be better politicians. And of course, the people who want to make a contribution, not through parliamentary politics, but through activism and influence parliamentary politics in that way, just keep fighting, don't give up. All of the things that you do are really important. Look, I remember I had a shitty couple of weeks in Parliament. I can't even remember what was going on. And I happened to come home from Parliament on a Thursday night. They're long days. You're often, not getting much sleep. And, you're working around the clock. And I remember coming on the Thursday and feeling completely exhausted. And on the Friday was the big climate strike. And what a great, boost that was for all of us who are fighting in the climate movement. It was just so, encouraging, inspiring. And for me, where you are surrounded by people who you just think, God, how can you have that worldview to then immerse myself in an environment of passionate, inspiring, committed young people, really important. So what you do matters. It has an impact in the parliament, and it also has an impact for all of us who are out there, speaking, giving voice to the values that so many of you have. So keep fighting.
Yeah, lovely. Keep fighting and find your community, because that's right. Those big rallies are quite rejuvenating and regenerative, and really keep kind of fueling that fight. That's really nice. Is there any regrets from your time in Parliament, or anything you would have changed?
Regrets it's an interesting question, because it's often one of the questions you get asked in interviews when you leave a job like this. I don't like the idea of regret, because I think regret sort of has a flavour to it where you're dwelling on the past, and I suppose in some ways what you're doing is you're rejecting who you are in the present, because all the stuff that happens to you, everyone makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. We make mistakes, in our day-to-day lives, and we make mistakes in our job and our work and of course, there were things I'd do differently, but ultimately, all of those things are things you learn from and bring you to where you are today. So I don't really have regrets. Would I have done some things differently? Sure, of course. Small things and probably some bigger things. I'm rocking the skivvy tonight.
I love it.
One of the so I sort of, I did think about. I remember there was an interview with I think it was John Laws. He was doing one of his final interviews with Lee Sales, where he was in a bathrobe and drinking a glass of scotch. So I thought about that for a minute, but I thought the skivvy would be that's a good example of, would I do that now, knowing what I know? Probably not. GQ's. I'm not into fashion mags. I barely even heard of GQ, and was asked to do an interview with that. That they have I think they've had Malcolm Turnbull. I think Adam Bant might have done one with them before, and so I just thought I'd do the standard cookie cutter politician in a suit. And it's not my thing, but when you're leading a party, part of what you're doing is trying to reach new audiences and speak to people who might not otherwise engage with the Greens, and that's a new audience.
Yeah. So
I decided to do it, and of course, when I got there, I found out I was sort of felt like a scene from The Devil Wears Prada. There was someone, I think the director of the shoot was walking around in a cape and people doting around him, and then I got handed the skivvy, and I was with Andrew Blyberg at the time, my media, and we looked at each other and thought, do we do it? Do we just ask for the suit? And I suppose we both just shrugged our shoulders and went, whatever. And I have now, I'm stuck with the moniker of the Black Wiggles. So, would I do it again? Maybe not. I think I'd probably just stick with the suit. But, in the end, you live, you learn, and you do, you do what you think's right at the time. And at the time, I felt like I had a responsibility to try and grow our, circle of supporters. And that was one vehicle that was open to us.
Well, at least we can all get a little bit of a giggle out of it now.
Yeah. This is the first time I've worn it, by the way, since the photo shoot. I don't know that I'm forever tainted. I don't mind skivvies, but I can't wear them anymore.
Oh, come in handy down at the Otways. Keep you warm down there in winter.
It sure does.
Speaking of, famous articles of clothing that you've worn, a lot of people have been asking, the full story behind those beautiful rainbow runners that you wore during the marriage equality campaign. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, the rainbow sneakers. So our office was in Collins Street, and just next to the office was St Michael's Uniting Church, and they were flying the rainbow flag during the debate. And so we called in on, I think it was Reverend Holland at the time, and made an appointment to go and see him and just thank him really for being brave enough. I'm sure it would have ruffled a few feathers within his congregation to do that and to make his position public. And he was wearing the rainbow sneakers. Turns out that it was his daughter had basically bought a pair of white supermarket sneakers and had coloured them in by hand. And because his daughter knew that we were meeting, she had put an offer in to make me a pair. And of course, I gratefully accepted. And I brought them to Parliament. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And then before the vote, I decided it was a last minute decision. I took off my shoes and put on the sneakers. And it was great because it was, it was just a story behind a community and people from right across, different parts of society. And sometimes from corners you least expect, people coming together around an issue in such a positive way. And the Parliament had, has been so negative for so long. So it was beautiful to do it. And those sneakers now are in the Museum of Democracy in Canberra.
Oh, fantastic! There you go. You made an eternal statement. You're in the museum. I suppose a final question before we go on to some questions from the audience. Hang on. Oh, sorry, let me get my notes. Oh, here we go. Oh, yes. Other than your extra grey hairs since you've been in the Parliament, How do you think your time in Parliament has changed you? You know, it's been a decent chunk of your life that you've been in there. So from Richard entering to Richard coming out, yeah, how has that worked?
Good question. Good question. I mean, at a personal level, you know, obviously an experience like that does change you. It has to. I mean, during it, you become a bit grumpier and a little more, you know, absorbed in that world. And sometimes that cannot be good for your perspective, and you can get drawn into things that you wouldn't otherwise be drawn into. So, you know, I think that's part of it. And hopefully I'm starting to lose some of that, you know, grumpiness now. I think I went into it really not understanding exactly how important those institutions are. And, you know, there are different theories of how, you know, how change happens. And obviously, you know, one lens that people look at it through is the, you know, the senior big figures in history and the ability of people individually to change, you know, the dial a bit. And what I really learnt was that the institutions themselves are so powerful that it's really important to change those institutions as much as it is to change the people within them. I mean, both of those things are really important. And you look at the influence of, you know, money over our politics, massive donations that fund both political parties from huge corporations. You look at the role of lobbyists and people, you know, this revolving door that some people don't even leave Parliament before they get on the payroll of, you know, big lobbyists. You look at the need for, you know, the importance of those sort of transparency and accountability bodies like National Anti-Corruption Watchdogs, just really understanding at a very fundamental level that our politics is deeply corrupted by these vested interests who spend a lot of money to get what they want, and that you can have, you know, people with the best of intentions in the place. You've got to get at what is going on underneath it. And it's that control and influence over our institutions. And I think that's one thing I learned, you know, pretty early on in the piece. And it was driven home relentlessly right through my 10 years there.
And so I suppose adding to that, reflecting on, you know, that you've discovered and learned, and, you know, how the system does need to be changed, where do you see the future of politics? Where do you see it heading? And the future of the party, I suppose, as well.
Well, I suppose one of the things I probably learned through my time in Parliament is I'm a lot less certain about things than I used to be. I'm, you know, I've probably got a bit more humility than I had when I went into the place. And, you know, I'm, you know, like everybody else, the last decade has really turned things on its head, and this year has done that, you know, in a very profound way. I mean, in the 10 years I was in the place, we had half a dozen prime ministers. You know, it's pretty remarkable. If you said people used to joke to me about Italian politics, given my background, and I think the joke's on us now. You look at what happened with climate legislation and the fact that we made those huge strides forward, and then we unwound so much of it. We've had 10 years. You look at what's happened with the media, and the media has changed fundamentally over my 10 years. When I first got in there were, you know, specialist reporters for all the major mastheads. They'd been around for years. They knew what they were doing. There were big investigative units within each of the mastheads. I mean, now we've got one person covering 4 or 5 different topic areas. Often there's huge turnover. So the role of mainstream media has changed, you know, profoundly. The control and influence of News Corp, and then of course the rise, you know, the rise of social media and the way we communicate with each other. This sort of retreat into our corners, the public square shrunk. You know, we're much more tribal. That the opportunities to reach across and actually have meaningful conversations with people, because I fundamentally believe that most people, when you spend time articulating what it is we stand for, the values that we represent, you know, they're values that are held by, you know, lots more people than vote for us, lots more. And And we just don't have those opportunities in the way that we used to. And I suppose one of the frustrations I had was that our politics became angrier and louder. And really, one of the things that I suppose I'm proud of, but in some ways I'm also disappointed that it took. It was for me to stand up during I think the last of the Liberal spills when Malcolm Turnbull was getting rolled, and to stand up and do my nut, actually lose my cool and rip into them. And I spent a few minutes doing that. And ultimately is one of the things that probably had more impact than almost anything else I did. It reached beyond the sort of bubble because it was an expression of the frustration that most people were feeling. But what is it that you can do with it? How do you take that into a more constructive space? And that for me feels like something that's changed. I think what we've seen over the last few months has been perhaps a challenge to that. And so I'm hoping that we'll see a reset as a result of this pandemic. I'm very optimistic about Greens politics, by the way. I know that if you look just purely at the demographics, firstly, I think, as I said earlier, I think when we have an opportunity to really articulate the values we represent, that we do connect with lots more people than currently support us. Climate change is going to be the big issue that defines, this century, and we're the only party equipped to deal with it. And you just look at our voting base. Our voting base is very strong among young people. As you get to older generations, their voting patterns are established through what patterns that were developed before the Greens even existed. So the vote for the Greens and third parties has increased over time. If you look at the last 30 years, the trend's going in one direction, and it's where we're getting a bigger share of the vote. So I think in time, what we'll end up with is multi-party government as being much more commonplace. Even without voting reform, we'll probably see, governments needing Greens and other independent voices to govern, just because the share of their vote has been shrinking consistently election after election.
Yeah.
I just hope we've got enough time. I think the long-term future for the party is strong. I mean, that's not to say we don't have issues that we've got to constantly address and keep our culture healthy and strong. But I'm much more optimistic about the future of the Greens. In terms of the future of parliamentary politics, we need a major overhaul. I talked about donations reform. We've got to do so many other things to reinvigorate our democracy. And I think if we can do that, we'll rise to the challenge. If we don't, I think we're in deep trouble.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a big challenge, but, our senators and Adam are out there kind of, spruiking and pushing forward. So hopefully we'll see a bit of movement. And you're definitely right. The youth that are coming up with the climate marches, it's just incredible. That really is definitely the way forward. Before we go to taking some questions from the audience, I've got one final question for you. Now that you're retiring from politics and can, talk on more of those controversial topics, we really want to know your take on this critical issue. Pineapple on a pizza or no pineapple on a pizza?
That's I know Lucy and the boys are listening at the moment, so maybe I could answer it this way. I check ID. You've got to be under 18 to qualify. If you're under 18, pineapple's okay. If you're over 18, it's a crime against food.
That means I can still qualify as a youth then.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Richard. That was really great. I'm just going to have a look and see what questions our mediators have popped through from the audience. Thanks, everybody, for typing your questions through. Let's see. Just bear with me a moment. Here we go. So from Rosa, thank you, Rosa. Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for your work and for your voice. We're so lucky to have you. For young people who are feeling a bit helpless with our current government, what words of advice would you offer in regards to using our voices and also encouraging our friends who may not be as political to get involved and make a change?
Good question. I don't think there's a magic. You know, I get asked this a lot, as you can imagine. I think people are feeling helpless and powerless, and the antidote to helplessness and powerlessness is to actually get involved and to make sure that you continue to be part of a movement that I believe is building and growing. And I think you look at what we're offering with the Green New Deal, for example, which is an opportunity to really change the direction that we're heading in, have been heading in over recent years, to reset and to really rebuild some of those institutions that are so critical to a healthy society. Recognising the role of government and doing all of those things in the climate and inequality space that we know are required of government. Now, how do you shift the dial? You roll your sleeves up, you get involved, you attend marches, you attend rallies, you decide what issue you're passionate about, and if it's climate, you get involved with your local climate organisation, whether it be at a local level or indeed at a national level. There are so many great. I'm not going to recommend one in particular because so many of them do great work. It might be that you're passionate about refugees. You get involved with, again, an organisation that does great work there. You roll your sleeves up. You commit your time, and you contribute to being part of a movement. I think one of the things I've learned is that politicians don't, and particularly the current crop of politicians, they don't lead, they follow. And it's up to us now to continue to build what is a movement that helps push our politics in a different direction. There are no shortcuts to it. And, there's the famous, I think it was Margaret Mead quote about never doubting that a small group of individuals can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
There we go. That's lovely. Thank you. Our second question comes from Anna in Melbourne. Anna asks, what's the future from drug law reform in Australia? What steps can we take to fight more progressive change in this space?
So I think the encouraging thing is there has been change across the world, and you only need to look at what's happening. For example, medicinal cannabis has shifted dramatically over the past decade. We're now seeing the regulation of adult use cannabis in countries, obviously many states within the US, Canada, many European countries, and New Zealand now about to hold a referendum on it. I think it's unlikely we're going to get any change with the current government, but I do think that a change is coming in that space because we're seeing the momentum really from right across the world. I think it'll carry over here. I was really sad that there weren't any other really politicians who were prepared to stick their neck out and become allies in this space. It felt like we were often fighting a lone hand. So building those allies within our parliament is really important. I think in the area of harm reduction, safe injecting rooms, we are seeing a big shift, and we've seen what was a very, I think, positive announcement for a second injecting room in Victoria. So we are seeing some changes happen, but again, I mean, there are no shortcuts to how we turn the dial on this. It's constant work and effort and building alliances. And one of the things I hope to do when I leave the Parliament is to continue to be a voice in this space.
Yeah, fantastic. You've been a very strong voice so far, so it'd be nice to see you. You've got good contacts in that area. So Lawrence on Zoom, Lawrence asks, how do we increase our primary vote across the country? There's an easy one for you, Richard.
Well, there you go. If I bloody knew the answer to that, there's a chance Adam would be Prime Minister right now. Yeah. So, again, my view is that I think we've got to be. It's very easy, particularly at the moment. I think there are a lot of forces that are pushing us into our corners. And I think, some of that's the new technology, some of that's, the change in the media landscape. It's not unique to Australia, by the way. It's something that's happening right around the world, of course. And I think for us to try to reach those new audiences, being prepared to not just get on social media and make ourselves feel better by, yelling and screaming at the latest, indiscretion, which I'm as guilty of as everyone else. But to actually have those meaningful conversations through whatever forum you can. You don't change people's minds, I don't think, by yelling and screaming at people. I think you've got to engage in conversation, and to create that space for conversation is really important, and that's working against us. I think the other thing to say is don't, just at a very pragmatic level, we're fighting with, one arm tied behind our back because we're fighting against two machines with millions of dollars behind them. And in the last election, with an $80 million machine behind one of them in the name of Clive Palmer, that corrupts our democracy. And we've got to redouble our efforts to get reform, around donations, lobbying, and an anti-corruption body. And I think you'll find if we can achieve that, we can get rid of some of the money out of our politics and start to see a bit more of a level playing field where outcomes aren't being bought by people with the deepest pockets. I think that'll have an impact. I think there are things that we need to be better at. We've got to make sure that our culture is strong and healthy, that we hold each other to account. We've got to do all of those things. I think that's important, to continue to build a healthy culture internally. All of those things together are going to help us increase our primary vote. Making use of new technologies, I think, will be helpful. I said something that I think people found very controversial when I first took on the gig, but I believe it. I think we are a voice for people who are, consider themselves to be mainstream and have progressive values. And I don't think we should ever, I don't think we should pull back from that. I think we should be ambitious, and for ourselves, for our community, and for the country, and understand that there are many more people who support everything that we're doing and everything that we say. And it is about having those spaces to create. The best way of converting someone to becoming a Greens voter is to spend some time with them, having a real conversation with them. So that ground campaign is really important as well. The conversations we have within our communities are really important.
100%. That butterfly effect is just so effective. I mean, we all have the same core values. We all want, have the same needs and desires for our family and our local community. And I think, that's definitely a really strong point there. So we've got a couple of people asking a similar question. Colin on Facebook, similar question to Mike Poulston. Hi, Mike. Apart from the Greens, which member of federal parliament did you respect the most? Or, it could be more than one. And who was your toughest opponent or most difficult to work with? Now it's the gossip. We're getting to the parliament gossip now.
Yeah, okay. I'll spill the beans.
Yeah.
Look, we haven't got enough time to talk about the people that I have very little time for, so I'll try and be positive. I mean, you can, I think, safely assume all of the people that, people listening in, whose blood pressure goes up whenever they just see them, same effect on me. So, in terms of positive, John Faulkner I always found to be a really decent person. So he was a Labor senator when I first got there. And I always found him to be a man of, integrity, prepared to criticise Labor for their failings, always fair and decent. And he was a big loss to the parliament.
Yeah.
So he was someone I really had a lot of time for. Look, I've had, a good relationship with, the personal level, and I think the decent human beings, people like Christina Keneally, within the Labor Party. On the Liberal side, while our politics are totally, we're on opposite sides, as Leader of the Senate, and I know this will be a controversial thing to say, but I always found Matthias Cormann to be very direct and forthright and honest in his dealings with me. So he would probably be the one person on the Liberal side, just at a purely, transactional level, that I at least felt like I could trust what he had to say. Some people will now have a different view after the leadership spill, but I can't only talk about my own experience. Penny Wong was always tough. I think Penny was from the Labor school of the Greens are here to hurt Labor, and we're going to play really hard. And I think there is a strand, and it's the dominant strand within the Labor Party, which is we're going to do everything we can to knock off the Greens because they hurt us. And there's very little spirit, willingness to want to cooperate together. So I always, that was always disappointing. And there were a number of times I tried to reach out and at least find those points of agreement where it was in both of our interests to try and, at least understand each other and work a bit more cooperatively. But that was always difficult. And so I hear from a lot of people, you and Labor need to work together. That's easier said than done. When there are people in the Labor Party who hate the Greens more than they hate the current government, and often have more in common with the current government than they have with us, that's always going to be a very difficult relationship.
Yeah, interesting playing field, definitely. I just want to note that we've got a lot of questions coming through. So thank everybody, thank you to everybody who's sending them through. We'll try and get through as many as we can over the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. So excuse me. A question from Tim Reed. I assume that's Dr. Tim Reed in Brunswick. What issues are you most surprised to find yourself involved in during your time in politics?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. There's a lot of curveballs that get thrown at you when you're in there. G'day, Tim, by the way. Good question. I mean, if you'd said to me that we were going to end up in this huge stalemate over, the backpack attacks and that, Labor and the government were going to walk away and basically leave a whole lot of farmers all across the country to have their fruit rot on trees because they couldn't reach an agreement over a piddly tax. And for us to be able to walk in there and resolve it, it was a very straightforward way of dealing with it, and to basically fix it at the last minute before we retired over the break. That was a surprise, and that day started very differently to the way it ended, and we fixed that, and we managed to through that process negotiate a big sum of money for Landcare. And so I felt very proud of the $100 million contribution we got to Landcare through that. So that was a bit of a curveball. At the start of my term, I thought marriage equality was a long way off, and we got there. I was pleased to be able to get medicinal cannabis on the list. Again, that was one that I didn't think we'd make progress on, and we got there with that. And then there are all sorts of things that come up along the way. We ended up, spending time debating people putting pins in strawberries, things like that. You don't expect, at the start of the week that you're going to be passing laws to stop people trying to put, sharp bits of metal into fruit and things like that. But there are lots of them, Tim. It's a good question.
What a strange time. My first fortnight up in Parliament was when all of that backpackers tax stuff was happening, and it was just insane. It was, incredible time. So, Brendan has a question. What advice would you have for coping with the publicity, scrutiny, and unconstructive criticism that comes with being in politics? And you've had your fair share.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think there are a few different layers to that. The first thing is to recognise that you represent things to some people that they despise, and that it's not actually you that they're, attacking. It's all of the things that we believe in. Now, that's true of the racists and the misogynists and the people in the community who think that that Pauline Hanson is a hero. So you've got to recognise that a lot of it's not personal, and that that you're there really as a symbol for a lot of people's anger and hatred. You've got to recognise that there are journalists with agendas, just as there are politicians and punters, and you've got to accept that. You've got to recognise, I think, that ultimately, politics can be a really hard-fought sport, and harder than I thought before I went into the gig. And it's a good thing to actually not read stuff. I've got to say, Rosie, one of the best things since leaving the job is not having to get onto social media regularly, or as regularly as I was, nowhere near as regularly as I was, to get the constant feedback that people feel they can give you, from behind a screen, while they're anonymous. So I think, and it's a bit of a trap, because often all you've got when you're in Parliament are the tools in front of you, and one of the ways you can engage with people now is through those platforms. But it's not the same sort of engagement you have when you're having a real conversation with someone. Yeah. And you have to understand that it's the medium that I think that is really distorting the way we communicate with each other, and that it's not healthy to dwell on any of that. And there are very few people whose minds are going to be changed when you spend, time yelling at them on Twitter. You've got to develop a thick skin. There's no question about it. And my skin's a hell of a lot thicker than it was when I went in there. You've also just got to be clear about why you do these things, and that sometimes doing these things come with those sort of sacrifices, and you've got to be clear about who you are, what you stand for. And every day you have to ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And what are the things I believe in? You make these sacrifices, huge sacrifices, spending time away from you. For me, it was, the biggest sacrifice by a million miles was just being away from Lucy and the boys, and living out of a suitcase for the best part of 10 years. And, if you make that sacrifice, that's much worse than any of the crap you have to deal with in terms of the attacks and so on. The ones that hurt most, by the way, Rosie, are always the ones from your own people. And you also have to recognise that within a political party, I think one of the things that I think the reason I'm confident about the Greens is actually very few of our fights are fights over substance. That there might be fights over or disagreements over the way we talk about something. There may be disagreements over the sort of approach we might take, parliamentary politics versus activism. How much do you engage with the parliamentary process? There are some people in our movement who think we should be using our parliament really just to build a movement and not engage at all with parliamentary politics, because by doing that you associate yourself with an institution that so many people are rightly critical of. I don't take that extreme view. I think you do. You're elected as a legislator, and you do have to engage with that process, and part of your job is to make bad laws a little better. And sometimes in doing that, you can be seen as being part of a rotten system. But I think that's the trade-off that you have to make when you're elected. But at the end, I think ultimately, in terms of within the Greens, I don't remember any really big. We had a couple of debates, but I think in terms of substantive issues, there's actually a very, we've got a very clear purpose and a very clear agenda that I think we're all committed to, deeply committed to. And when I look at some of the fights and disagreements within the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, they are very significant policy schisms that I think are much more dangerous for both the Labor and Liberal Party than they are for us.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. We're running close to time. I'm going to go just one more question if we can keep it short, but it's a big question, so good luck. Coronavirus and climate change, how can we deal with this converging crisis in a nutshell?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing that this does do is it provides us an opportunity to reset and to recognise how important it is that we accept the science on both of those issues, and that we're guided by a response that's grounded in evidence and science. So I think that's important. I think there's going to be obviously there's a massive economic challenge ahead of us, and the opportunities to come through a Green New Deal. I mean, we have Malcolm Turnbull, for goodness sake, touting a Green New Deal recently. So that for me says there's a significant appetite right across the political divide. And then what we're seeing is something, I think the response will cut across party lines, and we'll start to see some of those, you know, they're obviously small, but some of those more progressive voices within both sides hopefully recognise that this is the moment at which we can actually recognise the role for government to address the twin crises of climate change and economic inequality by massive investment in job creation in renewable energy. But I mean, we've practically got a universal basic income at the moment. Those ideas were unthinkable a while ago, and suddenly we're doing things that were once unthinkable. So I think there's opportunity. And as I said, I don't pretend to know, you know, about what's going to happen next any more than anyone else. It's up to us as to whether we seize that opportunity and use this moment to step in and tackle those existential challenges that lie before us.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Richard. And thanks to everybody out there sending your questions through. We won't have any time for any more questions. Though before we wrap up, we've got a bit of a surprise message to show you. So everybody hold tight. James is going to cut to a short clip for us. Thanks, James.
Thanks everyone for joining in this really important event to say thank you to Richard for everything that you've done, Richard, for the party over many, many years inside Parliament and outside. And I'm sorry that we can't give you an in-person send-off, and instead we're doing it virtually online. But I think it's probably not going to make a lick of difference when you're sitting relaxing on the beach with Lucy and the kids, and looking back and reflecting on the amazing things that you accomplished in your time in Parliament. Enjoy this next little period, and thanks again for everything.
Hi Richard. I'll never forget the warm, supportive welcome from you and your team when I joined the Senate. As we say farewell, I want to particularly thank you for all your work to make multiculturalism a big part of what we do as the Greens. I've always had a great time working with you and the community on these issues, and I do hope that legacy remains. I'm sure your family have been glad to have you home, and you're looking forward to some quieter times together. Thanks for everything, and good luck for whatever may come next. Bye!
Richard, you've been an outstanding senator, an outstanding leader, but most importantly, you are an outstanding human. I've absolutely loved working with you, and I know that when difficult decisions came up, and there were plenty of those during your leadership, you always did what was in the best interests of our team, of our party, and of the broader movement. So thanks so much for everything that you've given over the journey, and all the very best for the future. Good luck, mate.
Thank you, Richard, for your friendship, for your consultative and collaborative leadership style, and for your massive contribution to the Greens and to the country over your last decade in the Senate. I really hope that your next part of your journey is really fulfilling, and that you've got a lot more time to spend with your family. I'm really thinking of you tonight. I'm recording this at half-time at the footy when the Tigers are thrashing the Dogs, and I'm thinking of you sitting on the couch with your boys and enjoying what you get. So lots more time for that in the future. Good on you. Thanks.
Hi Richard, it's been so great working with you over the last decade. I've really appreciated the leadership you've shown, the dedication, your commitment to the job, the things that you have achieved. It's been great working with you. Good luck into the future with whatever you choose to do.
Hello Richard, just a quick one to say thank you so much for your energy, for your dedication and for your support of me and the team here in WA across the period of your leadership. Our Greens movement is so much stronger for having been served by you, my friend. I really hope that you enjoy a well-earned break now with Lucy and the boys, and that we get many more an opportunity to work together in the future. Okay, my friend, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Well, Richard, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for all of the service that you've given to us as a party room, but also the Parliament and the nation. We will miss you. And mate, can I just say, that day you called Barry O'Sullivan a pig, best day ever. Well done. Best of luck. Bye.
G'day mate, how you going? I know half the country's glued to the TV watching A Farmer Wants a Wife, but if there's ever going to be an episode of A Farmer Wants a Life, or maybe even A Farmer's Wife Wants a Life, I think you and Lucy would be the prime candidates. I just wanted to say mate, thanks for all the time that you put into the Greens and into Parliament and being our leader and being a friend and a confidant over the years. It's been great working with you, and mate, I can't wait to come down to Bells Beach and go surfing with you soon and catch up with you on the farm. All the best mate, catch up with you soon. See ya.
Farewell Richard, we are going to miss you so much. I just loved being your co-deputy for 5 years, and as I've said to you before, the thing that impressed me most was not how well you handled stress, was not how well you gave those fabulous speeches in the chamber, was not how well you dealt with everything that was thrown at you, but it was the fact that you took the time to always check in with people. You're one of the kindest people I know, and we are going to dearly miss you. Best of luck in the future.
Oh, that was lovely.
Oh dear.
Oh.
Oh, well.
Oh.
That was totally unexpected. Look, I mean, it's been such a privilege and an honour to do this job. It's been what an honour to work with the most talented, beautiful bunch of people. You know, we're better because we're in there. The Parliament is a much better place because of that team you've just heard from. It was an honour to lead them. It's been an honour to represent our movement. I mean, I couldn't have done it, and I could not have done it. Firstly, without the support of my beautiful wife and 2 boys. They made the biggest sacrifice. Lucy is a single mother for almost 10 years, and they're my 2 boys not being able to see their dad as much as they'd like. So I want to thank them. I've worked with some incredible people. Rosie, you and I worked together with, again, just such amazing, talented people who gave up their time, and it's more of a vocation than it was a job for so many people. So to all of the staff I worked with over the time, I want to thank them. And I want to thank everybody who's listening in, all of our members and supporters, because ultimately we only exist because of all of you. We give voice, and it's a privilege and an honour to do it every day. But we give voice to all of the things that all of you are committed to, all of the things that you believe in, because ultimately we want to see our country and indeed our planet be more caring to each other, and to recognise that we coexist with this incredible biodiversity that sustains all of us, and our job's to fight for it, to fight for each other. And I know that we're able to do it because there are so many people, over 1 million of them, who voted for us. But more importantly, our supporters and our members who fight for those things every day. So I just want to thank all of you for the support you've given me right around the country, going out on election day, seeing people in the freezing cold, handing out how to vote cards, doing phone banking with people, knocking on doors, people who make huge contributions, sometimes a big part of their, their annual wage. I'm just so grateful for all of you, for everything that you've done. I'm going to continue to be involved. I'm going to continue to be active within the Greens. I'm going to continue to make a contribution, but in a different way. I hope to be able to nurture and support and mentor some of our next generation of leaders, and to do what I can to perhaps a little more behind the scenes, not as much up front, but to continue fighting for all the things that we believe in. So thank you so much, everybody. It's been a great honour, a great privilege to do it. I can't wait to see you all again at the next rally, on the streets, and to keep doing what we're doing, because without us, the world is a worse place. So thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Richard. What a lovely note to end on. And I'm sure, thank you just for your service over the past decade and all of the contributions you've made to the party and to the country. Canberra will definitely be worse off without you. So cheers.
Oh. I was told to prepare. So cheers, everybody. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who helped put this on.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in the evening. Thank you to Eve and Sarah for translating for us. Thank you to Alex and James for moderating, and Chris for helping out on the socials as well. This won't be the last you'll see of Richard, I'm sure. But yeah, this concludes our webinar for this evening. So thank you so much for joining us.
Can't wait to see you in person, everyone. Thanks.